All right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? How is it going? I am Is There No One Else? And in today's video, I wanted to talk to you guys about Pax Dei and my overall impressions over the last year. Now, the reason I'm doing this video is because I should have done it a while ago and I got busy. And now with their announcement that they're going into early access as of yesterday, I figured it's better late than never to kind of talk about my overall opinion. And so that's what this is going to be. It's going to be my opinion as we've gone through Pax Dei over the last year. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I just want to provide my thoughts so that you guys are better informed on if you want to pre-purchase Pax Dei. So that's what this video is. Let's dive into it. First things first, I watched the initial trailer back in March. I applied for their alpha shortly thereafter as soon as I could. I've been signed up for their alpha for the last year. And so the idea of an immersive world in Unreal Engine 5 with toggle on and toggle off PvP, where they pull in a lot of the monsters that are supposed to exist in the game, a lot of their lore is going to come from mythical stories in the world today, really caught my attention. These are things that I think are really cool. Being able to build and shape your own world in a sandbox style MMO is something that also caught my attention. The idea of how different classes and play types are going to feel different, and when you play a certain style, it's going to have a fantasy style feel to it. That's another important aspect in an MMORPG for myself. And so it was interesting enough to have me sign up for an alpha for free. I don't have any money invested in it. I'm interested in hearing more. I'm interested in finding out more. And so they started announcing more trailers throughout the year. And then they announced their first alpha test last winter. And I was not invited, guys. I was very heartbroken, very disappointed because I wanted to participate, but found out later when they announced it that there was going to be a very narrow scope for their alpha. It was more built around harvesting, crafting, and building different buildings and structures and seeing what people could put together. And that's not typically my favorite player loop. I'm not against it. I'm not against trying those things and, if it's beneficial, participating in them. But I'm more interested in combat in the world and experiencing, quests and lore and stuff. And so the initial building stage wasn't something that was like super interesting to me. But I watched it on Twitch. They were nice enough to open up access to allow streamers to stream their initial alpha. And I watched a lot of people put together some really cool buildings and put together some structures and collect and harvest things. And it was interesting. Obviously, it was an alpha. And it was rough around the edges. I didn't get to participate in it myself, but I got to watch other people do it. And overall, a lot of people came away pretty impressed with what the original alpha was, and they provided a lot of feedback. A lot of the feedback at the time, I very well could be misremembering this, but there's some issues with collecting and harvesting, and people said that it was a little tedious to do. They said that the combat is going to be a placeholder. It's very rough around the edges. It's not going to be their finalized combat. They just, it's there for the sake of being there, and they'll work on it later. And so all that is fine. It's an alpha. It's very early in the process. I'm not going to judge a game based off of what an alpha is, because we know that honing and fixing and adjusting things takes time. So all that happened. And then shortly after their alpha, they announced their monetization, which was a very interesting time to do so. And so they announced that, it was going to be, if I remember correctly, you were going to buy the game. And then you also had to have like a season pass to prevent your structures from decaying. And then they were also talking about incorporating a WoW or Plex token from EVE Online. And that raised the attention of a lot of MMORPG players in the space, talking about how is this game going to be pay to win? Because the minute you start incorporating tokens, it creates that issue. And so a lot of people were justifiably concerned about it. It raised a lot of attention, a lot of eyebrows from players in the space about, hey, why are you announcing monetization immediately after your first very localized alpha? This doesn't make much sense, right? This doesn't make much sense to do so. And so the more pessimistic people were very concerned about it. The more optimistic people were like, okay, well, they haven't announced anything yet. This is concerning, but it's nothing official. If they're just getting feedback, no harm, no foul, right? So all that happened, and then in April, about 2 months ago, they announced their second alpha, and I was invited to do this. Now, I do have one stream on my channel. If you guys want to go check it out and see for yourself, see what the Alpha 2 looks like, you're more than welcome to go check it out. I do think that them having no NDA on these alpha tests is good, because it leaves people informed as to whether or not they're going to pre-purchase their early access. They hinted that they were going to go into early access like even at that point. And so I was very interested in going to test it. They said that they, received feedback from the community, and they iterated on some different systems, and they wanted to get feedback on what their improvements were. And so I was like, okay, sounds good. Obviously, I wasn't a participator in the first alpha, but I knew what it was about, and so I can see what improvements would be made for the second one. And so I went in optimistic that there were going to be some big changes, that things were still going to be rough around the edges, that there was going to be some issues, as is the case with alphas. And it was. There was a lot of collecting, a lot of harvesting. There was, which is fine. But they didn't really make any adjustments to their chests. And so there's all sorts of crafting available to craft weapons, to craft different things for these buildings that we were trying to make. And we had a group of about 5 of us collecting and harvesting different materials to upgrade things. Now, I was trying to upgrade weapons. I wanted to try and test out weapons to test out what their improved combat was supposed to be. And we chopped down a lot of trees. We collected a lot of rocks. We collected a lot of cotton and hide and all these other sorts of things to harvest. And as we're slowly refining and upgrading to the next level tier of harvesting materials, it was a lot of tedious things. Like, you started with a raw material, you had to refine it into a more complete material. You then had to go collect another material to refine that, and they would go in these chests, and these chests were small. And when you ran out of room in the chest, you then had to make more of them. And I want to say, for the 10 to 12 hours that I played, the group of 4 or 5 of us, we had 30 to 40 chests sitting on the ground. And so as we're upgrading different things, we would upgrade, refine, upgrade a material. We put the material back in the chest, refine, upgrade, refine a material, put it back in the chest. And then as we wanted to advance different trades and different crafts, we would then have to go through these chests to figure out what we had in order to refine them. So you would find yourself rummaging through these 30 to 40 chests to see if you had the materials. And if you didn't, you then had to go back and reverse engineer what you started with in order to refine and upgrade and work on for the next thing. And so I spent a lot of time farming hides in order to get a bow. I want to say I spent 3 to 4 hours collecting enough hide in order to refine it to get to upgrade to the next level. I spent a lot of time chopping down trees in order to get blacksmithing and woodworking up and running and all these other sorts of things. And it was just a lot of effort for that. We did go out in the world, and there were a few castles that had enemies in it, and the combat was very, very rough around the edges. I will be honest, it is an alpha, and I will keep saying that. It is going to be rough around the edges, but yeah, like, I came away thinking Mortal Online 2's combat is much more refined. It's much more intricate and in-depth, and I questioned what their improvements were. And so tying everything in together with what I saw, I didn't see an improvement, a big improvement from the first alpha to the second alpha. They took all this feedback. They took all this feedback from the community, and I didn't see much change from a harvesting and collecting standpoint. I think the performance was better. I only lagged out once. I only had one issue with the entire server going down, which is fine. I think they made improvements in that regard. But as far as the harvesting, refining, collecting, there were the same complaints that people said in the first alpha were still existed in the second alpha. The same choppy, very bad combat wasn't really refined. They gave us a CC ability, but it was outside of that, like, that was basically it. And so when they announced their early access, they said all the right things once again, like, hey, we want to build the world with you. We want you to be participate to help us shape this. We want to get this right. We want feedback from you.
We want it to be early in the hands of the players so we can make it ready together. There will be bugs, there will be issues, but we're so humbled to see how people have been receiving it already.
Going into early access is really the next major milestone for us, and it will enable us to host more players and get more feedback.
So basically, early access means that you are on the floor with us during development.
We really want to listen to the communities, but being able to make good calls on what are the new things that we'll be adding to the game.
Basically help us build this world.
We want to make it right.
And my question is why didn't you listen to the feedback the first time? If I were to invest money into this early access, are you going to listen to that feedback then? And so from my perspective on the outside looking in, I'm not currently going to invest in early access. I haven't seen enough. I want to see more from their lore perspective. I want to see more for as far as like different quest lines, different journeying into the world. Like just having a sandbox style MMO where you just have, a bear set here, animals set over here, players set over here. I mean, it's cool, but with rough combat, with no reason or knowing why these things exist where they're at, and with a very tedious refining process right now, I'm just going to pay attention from the outside looking in. And as they make improvements, as they make things better, and as it gets into a more workable state, I will be following it. And I hope that they make a lot of better improvements. But yeah, for me, I haven't seen enough. I don't know exactly. I mean, there's a lot of good words that they're saying, but I haven't seen anything outside of players building stuff. It's just a very barren world so far. The UI is an alpha, is what I'm trying to say. But there was no improvements. There was no steady improvement. We're not hearing more about what the world is about and what we're going to do when we venture into it. And so your guys' opinion may be a lot different than mine. You guys may have came away really impressed with the building and structural creating on a much larger scale. You may really like those types of games. It is more of a survival style game. It's obviously not a survival game, but that idea of building things is, a lot of players really enjoy that. And so you may be interested in doing so. You may be interested in following it, but for me, I want to see a little bit more. It's very early in the process. Like I said, they announced this game. They announced Pax Dei last year, March of last year. We're in June of 2024. A little over a year has gone by, and so it makes sense that there's not a lot shown yet. But as we get further along into it, as they start developing and honing things more, my opinion may change. But as it stands right now, good luck, Pax. I really hope you guys succeed, but I am out. Just like a Shark Tank investor, I am currently out, and I am hopeful that you make a great game. I will be watching, and I will be following. But that's gonna be the end of this video. If you guys have any questions or comments, please provide in the section below. Provide your feedback as well. If you disagree with me, that's cool. Make your case for Pax Dei and why becoming a founder now is a good thing if you want. But yeah, not enough for me so far. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.